Hello everyone, my name is Melissa Diaz. Today's video, I'll be talking about the struggles of creating Deal with Death. So let's just jump right to it. I apologize in advance if I stutter or stumble. This is unscripted, this is everything coming out of my mind, so I apologize in advance. So the first character concept of Deal with Death looked like this. You may know them as Evermore and the Undertaker, but these two were going to be Esmeralda and Death at one point, the main characters. At that point, Esmeralda's first concept name was Evermore, I believe. After playing around with some more designs and actually using the character concept of Death from Supernatural that appeared in my dreams for the design of my Death, I decided to scrap the first concept of their design and use these. The first initial story idea, or the first concept characters, it was going to be about Esmeralda's and Death's love affair and how they used the excuse of using the dealers and debtors for the reason they hang out a lot. It was going to be a rom-com story. So, the first draft. I really hate looking back on the first draft. The first draft of Deal with Death was that it was going to be a rom-com. It was going to be heavily stylized using these designs. And once I got Esmeralda and Death's character designs figured out, it helped me a lot writing the story. Fun fact, I love the first concept design so much that I decided to add them to the story and make them their own separate characters. And that's how I created Evermore and The Undertaker. They were already an established couple, and I even thought that they should have their own spin-off comic, but that's just a stupid idea that I had when I was writing the first draft. I don't even think it's gonna happen, but you know, who knows in the future. Right now I'm focusing on the actual story itself. When I was in the middle of writing the first draft, I felt like I was writing a story that has been, no pun intended, done to death. Two people falling in love with each other and denying their love, should I say, and using the dealers and debtors system to cover up that fact. And it just felt stupid, and it's been done to death, right? And I also had Esmeralda explain the dealers and debtors system rather than showing the system at work throughout the story. You know, the whole concept of don't tell, show it, you know, don't tell. I think it's called show, don't tell. There you go, show, don't tell. So, you know, the first draft would have also had Esmeralda have a bigger family. Nova and another character named Skylar would have been Esmeralda's step-siblings from Daniela and Gary. Also, Gary's character would have been a cheater that cheated on Sheena with Daniela. So his whole character would have been just a douchebag, honestly. Which I did not like. I just don't like the whole my characters being just douchebag in the story, so nah. There was also no antagonist or stakes in this draft, so it was a fucking mess, honestly. That's why I hate looking back on it now. The second draft of Deal with Death was going to be a serious theme with a hint of comedy to it. It was going to be like a slice of life coming of age story with not so stylized art, so it's going to be like my regular art. This second draft is where the idea of Esmeralda would have her fears of death, although the valid reasonings of fearing death was not developed yet. Esmeralda was scared of death because it could happen at any time, and it was scary not because of traumatic experiences. I also made Nova just be Esmeralda's and Freg's sibling from Sheena rather than from Daniela, and I also scrapped the character Skylar because I feel like he didn't really have so much purpose to the story. Daniela was not able to bear any children with Gary because, you know, personal reasons. This is where Gary's backstory would be developed for his own reasonings for cheating on Sheena. The story would have had Esmeralda and Death falling in love with each other, but it was going to be like a slow burn one. If you could relate to that. It's so infuriating, those slow burn stories. An antagonist was not developed in the story, and although there were stakes, I felt like it was not strong enough in the second draft. The reasons why I scrapped the second draft was that I felt like it was not giving my characters valid reasonings for the things they do, and I felt like shit was missing, and I was not grasping the idea of someone trying to overcome their fear, or what it meant to actually fear something. So I had to do a lot of research for that. I took like a year hiatus to try to figure it out, but I finally made the third draft. The third draft of Deal with Death is where everything started to flesh out and the characters came to be the characters they are today. No comedy to the story, just people acting like people, right? Like characters acting like characters. Esmeralda, Frank, Gary, Alice, now named Ethan, Evermore, Daniela, Sheena all had a purpose to the story rather than just being side characters to help out Esmeralda overcome her fears. Nova was no longer a sibling for Esmeralda, but rather than annoying downstairs neighbor. Esmeralda, Frank, Evermore, and Ethan, I made them represent the four horsemen of apocalypse. So Esmeralda, death; Frank, war; Evermore, famine; and Ethan, pestilence / conquest. That's where I decided to combine conquest and pestilence into one person. Because when the four horsemen are doing their like apocalypse, pestilence, like once everything is all over, pestilence become conquest, and that's where like conquest finishes the earth. So I decided to add that element instead of like debating if I should add conquest or should I add pestilence, because in the Bible conquest is more prevalent than pestilence. So I decided just to add combine the two characters into one, and like pestilence being conquest. And although Ethan has more of a conquest ideology than pestilence, but like pestilence in a way it's like disease, right? And like the sole purpose of disease is to divide and conquest, so it makes sense for it to be the same person, like conquest, pestilence become conquest. That's the whole idea I had for it. So I hope it turns out good at the end. That entire thing was for the fourth draft. I'm not even there yet, but I'm still talking about it. Sorry. So the third draft also had, this is where Baron Samedi, sorry if you're like Haitian or Voodoo or into that stuff. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm just like not in. I did a lot of research on him. Don't worry. Hopefully I represent him good enough to satisfy like people that believe in like Haitian and Voodoo and stuff like that. So I did a lot of research on him. Don't worry. Hopefully I represent him good enough for the story. But yeah, this is where I added him, and this is where I developed the antagonist for him and the story with his wife, Bridget Manman, I think. Yeah, this is where I developed them in the third draft. This was where I also decided that no love story about Esmeralda and Death was not going to be in it. It's more of just a two development of friendship and understanding about life and death and the importance of it. This is like more the idea of like don't fear death came along in the third chapter, because the first and second chapter was just going to be talking about this girl overcoming her fears of death, right? It wasn't like the whole you shouldn't fear death and like, you know, the whole concept of like nihilistic perspectives and stuff like that. So it started to play in this chapter more. It wasn't well developed, but it was present in this chapter. Also, having Esmeralda endure a traumatic experience was developed in this draft with death and her life living with PTSD and her phobia of death, and overcoming those experiences through therapy and with her friends. This is all about like overcoming trauma and how to deal with trauma and stuff like that, and how she developed her trauma and how she like overcame that. This is the whole story of it, and her death. Not her death. She doesn't die. She doesn't die, but like dealing with death as, you know, the whole title of it. So the third draft was a good path in the right direction, but I feel like something was still missing. So in the fourth draft of Deal with Death, I added and removed characters such as Brigitte Mamon because I thought she didn't serve so much purpose to the story. I did added like this whole backstory of her in the third chapter of her like dealing with her husband being obsessed with death and how she failed as a wife to help her husband. But I feel like that's kind of too much. Like I feel because I already developed all the characters, and I feel like adding another character with some sort of like baggage or more character with extra story, I feel like she was taking up too much time in the story. And I didn't want this story to be like 3 seasons and stuff like that. I wanted to make it short and sweet. So that's why I had to remove her from the draft or from the story itself, because I feel like she was taking up way too time, and I could have used that time to develop the characters even further. So yeah, I had to remove her. I really didn't want to, but I had to remove her for the story's sake and for like to make it short at least, you know. The fourth draft is just like the third draft. It's exactly the same thing, but I added new elements and fixed up the dialogue. So like the characters, you know, talk in a way that they represent them. So like Frank is a very vulgar, he's a very angry person. So I fixed up his dialogue so it can like be more like he swears a lot. And then for Evermore, she's more intelligent. She doesn't use this layman's terms. So she's like, her vocabulary is very big and very like open. So I had to go back and change her dialogue so she could use these big words. Frank could understand her. Frank can understand because Frank is not an idiot, but like he still, you know, prefers to sound like someone with low intelligence, but he's not, honestly. So I fixed up the dialogue with the fourth chapter. That's why I felt like I was missing something in the third chapter. This is where Baron Samedi becomes Esmeralda's debtor and manipulates her. This is where I develop Ethan and Frank's relationship better, and Evermore's hunger is more prevalent in this draft, and all of that. So the fourth draft is like, it's such a relief. I love how the fourth draft came up, and I just like it. It's so much better than the third draft, but it's like a 3.2 draft of the third draft, you know. I just love the first draft. I just love the fourth draft, should I say. Yeah. So in conclusion, in total, I created 4 drafts for this story, and a 5th one is probably in the making because I added new elements to a current chapter. And I need to add those elements to like older chapters. So it's super quick to fix up, and you know, it's nothing really too much to change, really. So the 5th chapter, the 5th draft is gonna look exactly the same as the 4th draft, just added new like tiny bits of elements to it that I forgot to add on like older chapters. So yeah. So it's not going to take up too much of my time, so it's just easier. So the story script, or the story's draft, is almost done with the final part still in development. There are only 3 parts to the story of Deal with Death. Once I'm done with writing the drafts, I can focus on drawing it and live stream it to you guys, the drawing process of it. In the next video, I will be discussing my mentality and morality when I was creating this story. So that's all I have to talk about. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys love the finishing product. I know it's not gonna be the best, but I put so much effort on this story. 3 years in development. I started this in my senior year of high school. So yeah, it's probably more than 3 years, but I feel like it felt like 3 years of developing this story. So I hope you guys like the finishing product, and stay tuned for the next video. So stay awesome, guys, and bye.